So I wanted to show this cool app I found called Artist Brushes. Once you open it up, this is what it looks like, and there's just a ton of Procreate brushes in here. Some are free, some are paid, some you get like one free brush from the pack, and then you got to buy the rest. You can buy them individually, like this one, you get one for free. The ones that say Premiere, you've got to buy, but you don't have to buy the whole pack, you can buy one brush. But I downloaded this one that is the Essential Brushes. It's completely free except for, no, this is the hairbrush, sorry. Hairbrush there, got the free one. This is the Essential Brushes. Completely free, and you can see there's a lot of brushes for free. So you just download it and then open it in Procreate. I haven't checked to see if these brushes work with Photoshop, but they should. They're the same type of file. So you can see they're imported into Procreate. I'm just going to create a new file. I'm just going to do my standard canvas that I always use. And I'm just going to play around with some of these free brushes. And you can see here's the pack. It's at the top of my list. First, they've got a sketch brush, which is great, just like a little pencil brush. They have an outline brush. Kind of similar to the outline brush I use, just has a little more drag. A smooth brush. This one has a lot of drag, but a really nice smooth line. Then the rest of these are some nice texture brushes. Really good for like shading, just adding in general texture. This one was kind of cool, Dune, it looks like rocks. There was another one, this one here, Cobra, actually looks like a textured skin. You can see these also being good for like portrait sketching. And of course I'm just clicking on these, making them the biggest size that it, kind of standard size it is, and then just in black. This one was called Diesel. That's a really cool texture. And yeah, this one, Wasteland, looks like stones. I can see this also being a really cool skin texture for different creatures. I really like this one, Cobra. It's another cool texture brush. This one was kind of almost a watercolor look. This one here is just a really cool, almost ink splatter looking brush. And Milky Way had like a natural brush feel to it. Sorry, excuse my voice. So I'm just starting with the sketch brush from the brush pack, and I'm just going to start doodling a real basic little dragon. Just nothing crazy, just a quick little sketch. And in my style of just it's kind of a almost cute dragon. And for this entire painting, I ended up only using brushes from that free brush pack. Only other thing I do use is the smudge tool a couple of times. But I could have taken one of those brushes and put it to the smudge tool, probably gotten some kind of cool effects, especially those texture brushes. I do really like this sketch brush. It's very similar to the one that I normally use. It definitely feels like a real pencil. And it gives you that really just lighter, sketchy look. A couple things, if I wanted to like change this brush, I might change the amount of drag just a little bit, because it was just a little slow sometimes when I was drawing. But that's a real easy thing to fix in the Procreate Brush Studio. And here I probably should have moved the dragon up so I could fit the tail in a little bit better position, but I kind of crammed the tail down there. And I don't sketch in all the details, I just kind of get some of the general shapes, and then I'll use an outline brush from the same brush pack to outline it and add more details. And again, this was just kind of a quick doodle just to show the brushes. And I don't have a subscription yet to that brush app, but they do have like a monthly subscription where you can get all the brushes and new brushes that come out. So as much as I like Procreate brushes, I have a ton. I might do the subscription because it's a pretty good deal, and it's a lot cheaper than buying individual brush packs, which is what I normally do. And I can't tell you how much money I've probably spent on brushes. I really need to stop. I've created some of my own recently, which I'll probably be uploading those brushes that I've created for free just so people can try them out. But yeah, I have spent a lot of time on brushes, and then I still go back to like a few default ones, but it's still nice to have them in case, I want to do a painting that's a different style or a different feel. And having a lot of options is just like in real life or real life painting. I have tons of brushes. Of course, I've got a set of brush for watercolor. I've got a set of brushes that are just for acrylic. I've got a set of brushes that are just for oil paints. And I find myself still buying more brushes. Like if brushes are on sale at the craft store, I will buy some new acrylic brushes, even though I probably don't need them. But it's nice to know if I'm working on a traditional painting that I have brushes available. So kind of think about it that way. Think about it as, if you're doing different styles and having brushes available. And so here I switched to the outline brush in that same brush pack, the one that's free, the essential brushes. Turn down my sketch layer so I'm not noticing it as much, and I just go around and outline everything. This is a style that I kind of used to do more. I don't do as many paintings in this style, but this was just for the sake of the demonstration of the brushes. So I tried to use just brushes from that brush pack. Now, had I used some of my other brushes, I could have gone, probably further on this painting. But again, I was doing it just as an example of those brushes. And yeah, I'm just outlining the entire thing, editing the arc there. Holding down, once you draw a line, if you hold down the stylus for a second, it will auto smooth it for you. If you don't know that little tip in Procreate, for someone like me that has very shaky hands, it's really good to have because people say, oh, I can't draw a straight line. Well, no, I really cannot draw a straight line because my hands shake so bad. So having that ability is really nice. I didn't sketch that in, but I ended up adding kind of a thicker dewlap for the throat. And if you're struggling with references for dragons, I know I've had a lot of people ask me about that. I do kind of a combination of a bunch of different animals that you find in nature. The legs, I typically look at the anatomy of like a dog or a cat. For the spikes and horns and like the little dewlap on the throat, that kind of all comes from different reptiles. Like I'll reference, iguanas and just different lizards that look really cool. And then the wings, of course, are typically based on like a bat's wing, and I use the anatomy very similar to a bat's wing. I also do the anatomy of the wing where it would actually be a hand. So you see the thumb sticking out, and then you see 4 fingers, which are the what make up the rest of the wing. And feel free to skip forward this part if you find it boring, because this is just slowly outlining and kind of fixing some of the mistakes that I did in the sketch, like actually drawing the back leg correctly. And like I've said before, I always struggle with back legs. I don't know why. Again, looking at different animals' anatomy in real life really does help. And don't be afraid to use reference. It's a big thing. Some people feel like it's cheating by using reference. I mean, if you're tracing somebody else's art, yeah, that's cheating. But if you're just looking at a painting and being inspired and using it as a reference, then there's nothing wrong with that. Most everyone, when they paint, they probably have some sort of reference. When I went to art school, we had art models, and when we did still life paintings, we had the still life right in front of us. It's not like we were just painting people or still lifes just from our imagination. We had the reference right there. So yeah, back to the wing. Again, making it look like if it was a hand. So it's got the thumb and 4 fingers. And there again, you see I use the a smooth line just by holding it down. And sorry, I kind of jump around a little bit where I'm outlining. Don't know why I did it that way. I guess so it wouldn't forget something. And I do zoom in quite a bit when I'm doing outlining just to make sure I get the details. But when painting, I try to stay zoomed out. That way I don't end up like over focusing on one area. I found sometimes that when I'm painting, if I stay zoomed in, I'll get a lot of detail in one spot, like the eye, and then the rest of the painting kind of gets neglected because I wasn't paying attention to it. I had zoomed in on the eye. So just a little tip. Stay zoomed out. When doing outlining work, though, that's a little different. And again, feel free to skip this because this takes forever. I think this is the longest part, honestly. Don't mind me drinking some coffee here. Yeah, outlining, which is one of the reasons I don't really do this style as much anymore, is because it takes so long to outline. And one of the mistakes I was making here, probably should have, and I realize it now watching this, is I should have changed my brush size. I stuck with kind of one brush size until the end, but doing different sizes with your lines will make a much better line art. I know a lot of people say, oh, my sketch looks great, my line art looks horrible. It's because with the sketch, you're getting different sizes of lines, just easily, just the way a pencil works. But when you go to outline with something, traditional media or digital, changing the brush size or pen size when you outline makes things look a lot better. It gives the painting less of like a stamp sort of feel and makes it look more like, I don't want to say realistic creature, but it just gives it a better appearance. Comic book artists do this all the time when they're actually outlining, when they're inking a comic book. They don't use just the same size line all the way around. You'll notice that a lot of things, like the main outer line, will be a little darker or a little thicker, and like places like the face that they won't focus, it'll be a little thicker. And then lines throughout, like the body and clothing, will be thinner lines. So that's something just to think about when outlining. Like I said, I made the mistake of not changing the size, and I see now that it kind of bugs me, and don't like the line art as much. And we're almost done. See, like here, I really should have used a smaller brush size. I eventually do, and I'm like, why am I struggling to draw these little spikes and using such a thick brush? But I was also trying to do this a little faster. See, like that one, I really should use. There we go. And see, I do resize my brush, and you see how much better that looks for the back spikes. But try to be as quick as possible for this demonstration of these brushes. And then, now that I got the main outline, I'm going to add a little line here for the belly color. Again, nothing, like, no crazy detail, just, I mean, I didn't even do like a back wing or back legs or anything showing. It was just a little dragon kind of floating. Since I got a smaller brush there, I had to go back and add just a tiny bit of detail to the eye and throw in a cheekbone and like the bottom eyelid. Now that I've got the line art done, quick thing in Procreate that's kind of cool is I will turn my outline layer to reference, so I don't have to redraw my lines again or outline the entire thing again to get color. So I just do base colors here on a separate layer, and you'll see I can just drag and drop, turn it to reference here. You just click on the layer and that little menu will come up. So it's referenced. I drop the color in there and you can see it referenced the layer above without me having to draw it all over again. Sometimes this works with, it usually works with really thicker lines. If I was doing like a sketch, this probably wouldn't have worked because everything has to be closed for the ink to stay, or the paint to stay within the lines. But this one, since it was big, thick, bold lines, it was pretty easy to just do reference and then just color drop and do continual color and just tap and get those colors where I wanted them. I will have to go back and fill in some little areas, like when it comes to like sharp points and corners. Sometimes it won't fill those in. You can hold the cursor or your Apple Pencil down and slide to the right to continual fill, and that will sometimes get those little spots, but not always. And again, here just color dropping, color for the belly, and then I use the same color for the horns and spikes. I just hit continue color and I just tap to fill those colors rather than having to drop it in every time. And that's one of the like cool little things on Procreate that I didn't know about until recently. And I was actually color dropping every single thing, especially when it came to small stuff. Then I realized it had that little continual fill, which is really cool. Some of the spikes that I've made so small, I'll just have to take the actual, take a brush and actually fill them in. And that's what I ended up doing here because they were just too small to color drop. And then I pick a nice red for the eye. And zoom in a lot of times too when you're doing color dropping to make sure you're actually getting it in the right spot. So color pick here, and then I'm just taking a brush and, like I said, filling in any little white spots that might have happened or colors that might have kind of gotten out of whack. Yeah, like that little tiny finger there. And you can see the point, that little area of the shoulder, just a little white dot, a couple little white dots there that I just fill in. Same thing, a little tight spot there, and like the very tips of the wing fingers, always little sharp points like that tend to not want to fill, even if you do the continuous fill. And same thing on the wing, I've got a couple little white spots that had to be fixed. And I just kind of go around the painting, zooming in, seeing if there's anything that I need to fix. And now that we have our flat colors, I turn the reference off the outliner. It's going to mess you up. And then I create a new layer on top. I'm just trying a new brush here, a heavily textured brush. And set this layer to multiply. This will be a shadow layer. And then I forgot to do clipping mask. So I clipping mask it to my flat colors. And make that brush a little smaller, and then I just start, adding in where shadows would be. Making sure that layer is set to multiply. And this textured brush is really fun. It definitely adds a nice kind of fuzzy shadow feel. And then just going back and kind of darkening certain areas. And changing brush size so it's not quite so big. You can see adding shadows into the wing there. And just sticking with that same textured brush. And then switching to next one, Dune, a little bit bigger texture. Kind of gives it a little bit more softer look. And typically when doing shadows, I almost always use two different airbrushes that come with Procreate. But the downside to that is it gives everything a very, very slick, very airbrushed look, which in some cases isn't bad, but it definitely makes it where the artwork looks very obviously digital, if that makes sense. So it's nice to have some texture in there, and it makes it look more like traditional painting, especially if you've got a brush that shows like brush strokes and things like that. And here I'm just experimenting with the different brushes. I put that one down and I like that it's a really neat texture, but decided it would look better as like the scales. So I make a layer under the shadow layer, set it to overlay, and pick a nice light color. And then I go over the entire dragon. It's a very subtle texture, but it does look a lot like scales. Now, had I not done the big bold black outline, could probably make this look even more realistic without that bold outline. This is kind of the style that I do more if I'm doing like stickers or something like that, or designing enamel pins. I'll do the really thick, bold black outlines. So this is kind of an odd combination here, but I just wanted to show these brushes. And I go over the entire dragon's body with that brush to add, like I said, kind of subtle little scales. Do the wing arm and the little wing fingers, which ends up being, even with the brush being small, it still goes outside the line. So I just go back in and erase that extra white that I don't want showing. So you can see there, just erasing almost like an overspray of that brush. So the scale textures are just within the wing fingers. And normally I would add a little more texture the same way to the wings, like the webbing of the wings. but I forgot. And like I said, this is a brush demo, not a painting demo or painting tutorial. I just wanted everyone to see what these brushes were like. And I wanted to see what they were like because, you know, hey, free brushes are always great. And that'll make me want to probably subscribe to that app because of these brushes. So, switching up brushes again, just grabbing the next one in the list basically. I start another new layer and set it to overlay again for highlight layer. But here I'm actually still adding more shadow. I made that brush quite a bit smaller and add more shadow into the wings. Probably went a little too dark in this and probably should have lightened up a little more, but just kind of playing around. And now I create a new layer, clippy mask it down to the rest and turn this to overlay. And this will be for base highlight, so I pick a light color, not quite white, but a very light green. And just resizing that brush down and adding in some highlights. And typically with this bold outline look, I would normally just do cell shading, which is a very, I think about it like comic book style shading. So you have a very hard line for the shading. But for sake of showing the brushes, I didn't do that style. So again, here just adding in highlights to the wing. Sorry about my voice. My allergies are acting up like crazy. Spring in Texas is not fun sometimes because everything's in bloom. And so here, adding those white highlights, and I'm going back and using the smudge tool to kind of just blend them in a little bit. And then going over the body to add some highlights in. I'm just making that brush even smaller. And I did lighting a little weird on this one. Again, I didn't really pick, normally I will pick where my light source is coming from and make sure that I have the light on the right side. But because I was just kind of playing with these brushes, I probably put light in some places there really shouldn't have been light. And then I realized I've done no shadows on the head, so I go back and we'll shade the around the eye socket and lower jaw. And really the horns have no shading at this point either. But just going over like the tail area now with some highlights. And for the sake of the demo, I tried to use every brush in the brush pack, but there was a couple that I didn't do because they just didn't see where I could use them. So I'm creating a new layer below everything just to do a real quick little background and pick this really cool like paint splattery brush just to add some cool color. So that dragon's not just completely against a stark white background. And some of these other brushes I probably could have found a use for if I did some more blocky stuff in the background maybe. But here I do a layer on top of everything, clipping mask it down. I'm going to try this spirit brush, make it smaller, and then try a lighter color for some really bright highlights. Like on the top of the horns. And like on the back of the neck, you can see there in the wing, adding some brighter highlights. Which this brush has a very painterly feel to it, meaning like it acts more like a real paintbrush. You lift things up and you can add layers with the brush itself. The downside of that one though, it doesn't really get very small, so I end up having to switch back to the smooth brush to do some really bold shadows around the eye socket and under the eye. I have to go even smaller to add a little shadow to the eye itself. And I could have taken this further. I realized that I'd end up not doing really bold highlights, like I don't put a highlight in the eye, or do really much with like the bounce light or reflective light, but again, just kind of a demo. Now I've gone back to my multiply layer, still using that smooth brush and adding in some more shadows. Go back and pick more of a warm gray. But still not real happy with some of these shadows, but that was just sort of the nature of these brushes. I see this brush pack would be really good if you wanted to do a different comic book style. And here I was just making sure that it was on multiply. And then using the blender to kind of blend some of these shadows out. But definitely used that smooth brush to add more shadows. Here I just kind of quickly block them in, then use my smudge tool to get them a little nicer style. And it starts to have almost a watercolor feel to it. Again, the big bold outline doesn't look quite right. And feel free to skip forward again if you want. Some of this is just boring parts of just adding shadow and figuring out where the shadow needs to be. And sometimes with adding shadows, yeah, I do zoom in a little bit, especially in areas that are really tight. But it is good to like zoom out and make sure you're not over detailing an area. And then there I go back to overlay. And kind of brighten certain areas back up. Make that brush a lot smaller to get sort of like the look of an eyelid under that brow. And then here I'm just adding in brighter highlights and kind of the key areas. Again, this one, don't take this as a demonstration for light, because I know I put some light and shadows kind of in the wrong spot depending on where my light source was. But just really wanted to experiment. So yeah, just adding a little bit of real light green. And trying out a different brush here for some bigger highlights in the wings. But all in all, this is, for free, a really good brush pack. You definitely could do an entire painting start to finish by just using these brushes that it comes with. Like I said, I probably would change some stuff up if I was going to do or use these brushes normally into kind of my workflow. There's some things that I would probably change and customize the brushes just a little bit. But as they are, they're really nice for being completely free. I don't really do much beyond this. I turn the outline layer down just a little bit, lower the opacity so it doesn't look quite so stark, but yeah, there you go. Showing the essential brushes that are free through the Artist Brush app.